All right, so today we're diving into the top India headlines for January 3rd, 2025. Just imagine you're scrolling through your news app, tons of stuff popping up. It can be kind of overwhelming, right?
Definitely lots to unpack there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where we come in. We're going to try to break down what's actually important, what's worth paying attention to, and maybe even what we can learn about India's future from these headlines.
Right.
And luckily, I've got our expert here who, sees the big picture, those connections that most people
I
miss.
try. I'll do my best. Always an exciting challenge, these deep dives.
Right. So these first two headlines, they caught my eye. New governors appointed in both Kerala and Bihar.
Oh, yeah.
Now, at first glance, you might think, okay, routine stuff happens all the time. But governors are a pretty big deal in India.
Absolutely. For our listeners who might not be super familiar with India's system,
Hmm.
governors, they're basically the heads of state for each region. They're appointed by the president.
Yeah, they're not elected by the people, but they have some serious power. They can influence policy, even dissolve state assemblies in some situations. So who gets appointed? That's not just a formality.
Definitely not. And this time, these appointments, they kind of raise some eyebrows, Like, take Kerala. The new governor there, Rajendra Arlikar, he's a longtime politician, very connected to the ruling party at the national level. Kerala, though, historically, it's been a stronghold for opposition parties.
So sending in someone close to the ruling party, that's got to be a strategic move, right?
It seems that way. Could be an attempt to increase their influence in the state. Now, Bihar. Even more interesting, Arif Muhammad Khan, the new governor there. He's known for speaking his mind. He's actually criticized the current government a few times.
Oh, wow. So are we going to see some clashes in Bihar?
Yeah.
A governor and the state government butting heads?
Could definitely happen. When you have a governor who's not afraid to challenge the status quo, things can get interesting, especially if their political leanings are different from the state government.
So something to keep an eye on, definitely.
Mm.
But let's shift gears a bit, something a little more uplifting. This headline about PSLV C-60.
Oh, the space mission.
Yeah, and it was a success. Now, PSLV, that stands for Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. It's basically India's go-to for launching stuff into space.
Workhorse of the program.
Exactly. But what makes this mission extra special is this space startup firm involved.
Huge deal for India's space ambitions. See, for a long time, it was all ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, the only player in the game. But now you've got these private companies jumping in.
And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. More players mean more innovation, competition, drives down costs. This startup in particular, they were key in developing some important parts for this PSLV mission.
Really shows you how much the private sector is stepping up, right?
No doubt. So, what does this all mean? I think we're going to see even more private companies getting into the space race in India. Imagine a few years down the line, you could be booking a trip to space on an Indian company's rocket.
That's a future I want to see.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back down to earth, literally. This headline about the Supreme Court.
The one with Jagjit Singh Dalawal.
Yeah. Turns out this case is all about those agricultural reforms and how they're impacting farmers. The Supreme Court just issued a clarification of stance, which basically says the government can make these reforms, but they also got to listen to the farmers' concerns.
It's like trying to balance things out, The reforms are important, but they have to be done in a way that doesn't completely ignore the people they affect.
Which are a lot of people. Farmers are a huge part of India's population.
Absolutely. That's why this clarification is so important. It's not just a legal decision. It's a social and political statement, too.
Okay, so speaking of complex issues, this next headline, it caught my attention because it involves Prime Minister Modi. He's launched an initiative to help develop those Maoist-affected areas.
Right. Trying to improve things in those regions.
Now, I know we've talked about the Maoists before, but just as a reminder for our listeners, they're basically these insurgent groups active in certain parts of India, often advocating for communist ideas. And the areas where they're active, they tend to be underdeveloped, facing a lot of problems.
Exactly. And this initiative, it's trying to address those problems head on, investing in infrastructure, education, healthcare. The idea is if you improve people's lives, give them opportunities, then maybe they'll be less likely to join these insurgent groups.
Makes sense on the surface, but are there any, potential downsides to this approach?
Well, you always have to be careful that the benefits of development actually reach everyone. You don't want certain groups left out.
Yeah.
And building trust, that's crucial too, especially in areas that have seen conflict where people might be suspicious of the government.
So it's not just about spending money. It's about making sure it's spent wisely and that you're actually building bridges with the communities. And that brings us to our final headline. This one's about those efforts to, deal with all the travel disruptions caused by fog.
Oh yeah, fog can be a nightmare for travelers.
Totally. Especially during certain times of the year, airports get shut down, delays, cancellations, just chaos. But it sounds like the government is finally getting serious about tackling this.
They're putting money into new fog detection systems, better communication, even looking at those fog dispersal technologies, trying to actually get rid of the fog.
So maybe someday we won't have to worry about getting stranded at the airport for hours because of fog. I can dream.
Maybe, but it shows you how important it is to adapt, find solutions to these everyday problems.
Well, that was quite a journey through today's headlines. We had political maneuvering, space exploration, legal battles, development initiatives, even fog-busting tech. Who knew you could find so much in just a handful of news stories? And the thing is, all these seemingly separate things, they're all connected, they're all shaping India's future in some way. So here's a final thought for you. Of all the headlines we discussed today, which one do you think will have the biggest impact on India in the long run? Think about it. Let us know what you think. And keep exploring. Stay curious. We'll catch you on our next deep dive.